Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. This is Tish Ross, and this is No Judgment here with Tish Ross, the podcast. I'm so happy to be back. I'm kicking off this new season of the podcast with an incredible guest. I've always said that anytime someone comes in, that the Lord has led us to one another, whether it's me to them or them to me, I think that. Um, I'm so honored and grateful that people trust me with their stories or they say yes to God to come on and to share um, some of their very personal journeys, and whether they're still in the midst of it, whether they have moved past it, whether they know a friend maybe that's going through something, or they're going through something themselves. Maybe it's something that they'll go through in the future. I give God the glory and the honor, and I'm privileged. We are all privileged to be able to do God's work every day. And so today I have a very special guest, again, kicking off this new season of podcasts. And I hope that you will listen and share and ask questions in the comments as we share this on YouTube. And most definitely we'll get back and hopefully be able to answer those questions. And if not, I know that you can even go straight to the source in terms of my next guest. So I have thought so much about what I wanted to title this particular podcast, and I've titled it The Day That My Life Changed Forever. But one of the things that my guest said was, when I always tap into my guest and ask them to, really think about what would you like for this podcast episode to be called. And um, Francine, my guest, said that, that she would say something to the effect of, the day I split in half. And that made, at first, I was kind of like, well, what does that mean? And I'm going to have her explain that in her words just so beautifully. And once she did, it made complete sense. So I'm going to welcome you guys. I want to introduce my guest. Her name is Francine Ivy. She is a coach, a speaker, a trainer, and a minister. And boy, are you guys in for a great treat. I'm going to welcome her in. Welcome in, Francine. Thank you for coming. And thank you for saying yes to coming to the show.
Absolutely, absolutely. What an honor, Tish. Thank you so much for inviting me. It is always an honor to share our story and to share what God did in the midst of a really hard time.
Absolutely. So I want you first just to kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are, and behind even those titles, coach, speaker, trainer, and minister. So a little bit about yourself, and then maybe a little bit of your childhood and how you grew up.
Sure, sure. So start off with who I am right now. God has blessed me with an incredible company, a team of coaches. We're unapologetically a faith based coaching team, and we help entrepreneurs kind of combine their success into their significance and create kingdom impact. And we love what we do. My daughter is the COO. My other daughter is becoming a coach and going to be teaching actually the children of many of our clients, kind of helping them through those ages of seventh grade through 10th grade, and when they're trying to integrate all of their faith with their with growing up in a world that is kind of confusing for us. So
My goodness, I love that.
so yeah, so that's what we're doing right now. Scary, scary thing. I tell people all the time, I've never been qualified to do anything God's ever called me to do. I've just trusted him and given him my best yes. And he just keeps putting me in places that challenge me. And I walk in. I wish I could tell you I walked in like raising my hand and going, "Yes, I can do it." No, I walked in fearfully and probably digging my heels in the whole way. But absolutely loving everything that he's called me to do. As far as childhood, Goodness, I was raised in a military family. My dad had a background of Christianity. His mother was radically saved and loved Jesus, and his grandmother and all of that. But at 17, I think he was 16, 17 years old, he tricked his mom into allowing him to join the military by signing a paper she thought was for school, but it really was to enlist him. And, yeah, and he kind of embarked on a journey, and in that journey also began to explore all the other faiths and really didn't have a strong faith himself. He met my beautiful mom in Japan. I'm half Japanese, and I like to kid that I'm half Japanese and half Alabama, and that's probably why you hear a little bit of a twang in what I in my speech. I lived most of my years in Asia on military bases. I'm one of those military brats that cried when my dad retired. I did not want to leave the military.
Really?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved living overseas. I loved everything about the military. My dad going on ships, the ships coming home, and being able to go out in the front yard and find new people probably almost every week and integrating into a new group of friends. It wasn't uncommon for us to just kind of, if we got to a new military base, find the first group of friends and say, "Hey, I just shipped in from whatever town, and you were a new friend and you were integrated pretty quickly into it." So it was a shock for me at middle school when we moved to Mobile, Alabama, which is where my dad was from, and I walked up to the first set of friends and they looked at me when I said, "Hey, I just moved here. Can I join you?" And they said, "No." I was like, "Well, that was odd." And kind of threw me in a loop. As far as my faith during those times, we really didn't have, we didn't go to church. I knew that there was probably someone keeping an eye out for me. But pretty much it was be good and do good things. And my parents were moral and they loved the Lord. I mean, they were moral and they loved people, but as far as Christianity, it wasn't in my home until way later. I actually gave my life to Christ at 21. So
Wow, very, very interesting. So, once you gave your life to the Lord, did you go to school after that, college? What was your journey like, to meeting your husband?
yeah, interesting enough, at 18, graduated from high school. It started my first business. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Probably has a lot to do with that. I'm an only child, so never liked having a boss. And that didn't go so well. It was a modeling agency, I mean, it went good. We did a lot of events and some print work and things like that with some of the students that we had, and we were taking them through that. But the partnership didn't work. I was partnered with someone else. I later then started other businesses and um, I did work in several different positions and stuff like that. But um, at 19, my husband was reintroduced to me by actually his mom and my mom kind of working that out. He was a youth minister. I was not serving the Lord at the time. I had just had a really bad breakup. And honestly, he was really just showing up to my work and leaving cards just to let me know that the Lord saw me. And it wasn't that I was really a bad kid. I'd made some really bad decisions trying to fit in, obviously, trying to find my way and who I was. But I had a heart for people and had a heart to do good things. Um, it wasn't until, honestly, I began going to his revivals. And I've never even told this part of the story. He started training me to sing. And, I had done modeling work, I had done beauty pageants, but I never thought I was a singer. But he said, "I think you are a singer." He was a musician, big time, a worship leader and a pastor, and spoke. And there was always a part of me that felt like I wanted to tap into that world. But I didn't think I could because singing was one of those things where my ear wasn't trained, and so I would jump keys periodically if I felt like it was not in the range. So, he began teaching me how to sing, and, I remember the first time at a revival, he said, "I want you to sing," and I remember thinking, "Oh, I like this. I like." Anyway, he said that he knew that I was his girl when one day at one of those revivals, now understanding I'm not saved, I just love people, right? But I'm up front and all the little girls were around me and I was just sharing with them and talking with them and loving on them. And he was on the other side of the stage and all the little boys were around him. And he said, "I remember that that was the picture God had given me for my girl, that she was going to be just as involved in ministry as I was." So,
Wow, how beautiful. Oh my goodness, and it sounds like he, obviously being a pastor and not just being a pastor, but a follower of and a believer of Jesus Christ sounds very encouraging and very uplifting, especially to bring something out of you. I mean, if someone were to say to me, I can't even think. I mean, I love to sing, but boy, oh man. But if someone were to come and say, you know what, I think, I could teach you to sing. Maybe they could help me to sing a little bit better, but I don't know that I would have the confidence to do that, but I say that, but however, you have someone in your life that encouraged you and lifted you up enough and taught you and saw you in a way that maybe you didn't see in yourself, and then there you were singing at a revival, and him being able to see a picture of the two of you the way that the Lord had showed him. So that is just absolutely beautiful. So you guys then decide to date, or how does that relationship start?
yeah, the interesting thing is that we were such good friends. So we went from, um, being friends, and I don't really know where the dating started. I do remember a moment where he had gone on a trip with some friends for a conference, a Christian conference, and I missed his phone call. And back then, it was on a little box recorder, right? So if you weren't home, you missed the call and you push the button and you would hear their voice. And I remember rewinding and listening and getting all teary, and I thought, "Something's up because that's not normal," right?
Mm.
That's when I realized that, "Oh my goodness, I think I'm falling for this guy." He was 15 years older than me too,
Okay.
and had never been married. And, so that's the reason why in my mind, it never dawned on me that this would be that kind of relationship. Um, but I realized I think I'm falling for this guy. Now the funny thing is, if you met us, you would never know that he was 15 years older than me. As a matter of fact, he said I'm the one who 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 helped him, and he helped. I mean, and of course he led me to Christ.
Mm.
So, and discipled me, which was really powerful. But we can't tell you where the friendship turned into dating. And my kids ask me all the time. And when the dating, I mean, honestly, we would look several years into the marriage and go, "Oh my goodness, we're married." Right? So, when did this happen? Like, because we were such good friends. I woke up to my best friend every
Mm.
day. Like, seriously, like, it was that kind of relationship. Still to this day, if I think about his blue eyes and him holding my hand, my tummy turns over like a schoolgirl at a Justin Bieber concert. So,
Wow. Oh
yeah,
my
I
goodness.
mean,
I have a
it's
picture of him I want to share, one that you,
yeah,
shared with us, and let me, see if I can get that really fast. Bear with me, guys. Here we go. I know what you mean by blue eyes. He has some really
yeah.
piercing blue eyes. How sweet. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. Now how long
yeah.
do you know about how long you guys had been married here in this picture?
We were probably about 25 years married there.
Okay.
So,
And your
mhm.
husband's name is Wade?
Yes,
Yes.
Wade Ivy, yeah.
Precious. Yeah, he has some beautiful blue eyes, and you guys look perfect together. I love that picture. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, you are so welcome.
Okay, so then you guys get married, and, you said that he helped, lead you to the Lord.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
then you guys are dating and best friends and get married, and how soon after you guys are married that you start a family?
Yeah, 5 years. Um, it's funny because you would think with him being a little bit older that he would have been in a rush, to have children, but he was like, "I've waited all my life to find my girl. I
Mm,
wanna spend time with you."
mhm,
And so we spent 5 years really just doing ministry together, walking alongside each other, riding bicycles. I was learning to fish. He took me skiing. We were just integrating our life together. And if you can afford that in your marriage, I actually encourage that.
mhm,
Um, we were best friends going in, and we got 5 years of being husband and wife,
mhm,
and it was a beautiful thing. And when it was time to have kids, we were ready.
mhm. I love that,
Um,
and I agree with you on that. I think that it is, God first, right? And then, our
Mhm.
spouses and then our children, and to be able to, like you said, if you, are able to do that, or if that's something that you want to do, I personally feel like that would be the just the best way to go, spending that one-on-one time, getting to, like you said, be husband and wife, be in that relationship together, and then you're ready to start a family together, and like you said, you guys were ready and had
yes.
your children. So, which of your children did you have first? How many kiddos did you guys have?
We had 3,
Mhm.
all 5 years apart, not on purpose, just a God thing.
Uh-huh.
My oldest is Reagan, and she's now 28 years old, and is the COO of our company. So, first little girl. My second child is 23, and her name is Peyton, also becoming a coach. And the caboose of it all is the little boy who's now 18 and 6'3", and his name is Grayson.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Now, we come on to my guests come on to this podcast, and we share a lot of our testimonies or journeys, if we are not sure who God is, or we're not even, sure what we believe, and that's totally fine. But people come on and they share their journeys and their trials and their tribulations, they share life. And some of my guests have shared what they've gone through and maybe how they have come to the other side and how they're doing today. I want us to move into something that you and I were chatting about a little bit earlier when we talked about loss, and we
Mm,
talked about grief and what grief can look like or feel like, or maybe even help us to draw closer to God for
mhm.
us, and how good God is every day through it all, the good, the loss, all of it, through the grief. And I was chatting before I brought you on that you had a way or a title when I asked, what kind of title might you uh, title this
Yeah.
episode of this podcast? And you said,
Yeah, the day that time split in half.
the day that time split in half.
Yeah,
And when you share your testimony, or as you're sharing your story, towards the end, I'd kind of like for us to talk about why that might be the title that you would title this episode. And once you
yeah.
shared that and we were chatting, I thought, wow, okay, I get that. I get that
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
I too have been through similar. And there have been times when I thought that the world is going by, but I'm still here, or
mm,
forgetting things, or the timeline of certain events. And so that
yeah,
title really made a lot of sense when it came to titling this podcast. So,
yeah,
Francine, tell us about the day that time split in half for you.
yeah. So just to kind of prep the scene, at this point, we've done ministry for 27 years together. We were the couple. We homeschooled the kids. We ran a business, but we ran it together, and we ran a ministry, and we ran that together. So he didn't really go to work the whole and I didn't have a separate life. I didn't go to work over here and he went to work. We did everything together. And so for those 27 years, it was pretty much 24/7 together. I mean, obviously he would go play golf or do things with his friends and I would do things with my friends, but for the most part, everything. We did everything as a family. We'd come off the evangelism kind of field where we were traveling and speaking and doing marriage conferences together. He was led to come back home to Mobile, Alabama, where our families were, and start a church. It was going really well. It was growing. I was running a sales team of about 180 on our sales team. It had reached the top 0.1% of our company, had been speaking at big conferences. Honestly, our life was really in a great place. Our kids loved the Lord. Reagan at that time was 21. My middle daughter was 16. My youngest was 11. My son was 11. We had had an incredible Sunday morning. My husband had preached a message called Consumed by the Call. He had literally called out everybody he had ever laid hands on and set into ministry. We recorded that morning in video form, had gone live, it was just a beautiful day. That day, my middle daughter had led worship. She was feeling led to be a worship leader, and my son, who was 11, at the very end of the service, just as the video was turning off, you can see his little hand go up on his dad's shoulder, and he gave his life to Christ that day. It was an
Mm.
incredible. God had given me a prophetic word about his goodness in the midst of trial. The worship was sweet that day. It was just so sweet. That afternoon, we got home. We had fried chicken because that's what all good preachers' families have on the afternoon. The kids had run off to, do their thing. And it was just me and my husband at the table. And he looked at me and he said, Francine, this is the day of the Ivies. And I was like, what do you mean the day of the Ivies? And he said, I could not be happier with where our family is right now. Such a good day, such a day for us. Little did I know that in a few hours I would need those words so very badly. So I stepped into the office to train our team. I was actually training them through a Bible study. Back then, the video conferencing was not in full form, so we were on a phone conference, and I had told Wade when I come out, let's do our normal Sunday evening thing where we plan for the week. Let's have coffee. He said, "Well, I'm going to go get some creamer." And get a few things from the store. I said, great, I'll meet you out as soon as I get done training the team. When I came out, it ran a little long, and I looked around and he wasn't home yet. And I asked the kids, I said, "Where's dad?" And they said, "He's not home yet." The store was only about 5 minutes around the corner. So there was just a part of me that already God was preparing something's wrong. I grabbed my keys. I told the kids, stay in the house. I'll be right back. And I rounded the corner, and that's when I saw the ambulance and the fire truck and all of the police cars. At that point, I didn't know what had happened. I obviously was just praying and begging that he just stop to help or that he was caught behind the other side of the traffic.
Mhm.
But I think down deep inside, I already knew. I immediately called a couple of friends and told them, I need you praying. I don't know what's going on, but my body was already beginning to react to this situation. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but I think I need your prayer. And I remember the police officer walking up to the car, me trying to describe the car, telling him that my husband was not answering his phone. Um, Looking back, I saw the look on his face. We had a specialty tag and that said made for worship. So I knew he already knew.
Mm.
Uh, Two of my friends showed up. I really don't know how they got across town that quickly, but they showed up before that police officer came back to confirm that my husband had gone home to be with the Lord in an instant. Um, and I remember my friend's husband just catching me. Um, and, being a pastor's wife for a long time, I had been there in those moments. There was a season where police officers would actually call us to show up at the house before they did so that we could be a support because we were a predominant church in an area. So I'd been there in those moments, and I would have thought that I knew what that moment was like. Um, but until you experience it, you really have no idea. And there I was on the other side of that. Um, and I don't really and we talked about this a little bit before, everything became a blur after that, right?
Mhm.
Days go by, I remember, showing up at home, trying to express it to the kids, what had happened. My one of my oldest daughter was actually on a cruise with my best friend and her best friend, and, having to reach out to the cruise because everybody was already posting on social media, and having to call her and tell her while she was on that cruise on her way back in. I mean, just pure chaos for a little while of, um, and at that point, really going through emotions, right,
Mhm.
of things that you have to do, and struggling with, I'm grieving, I'm hurting, but I have kids
Mhm.
that are grieving and hurting. Thank goodness for the incredible tribe that God had put around me, that filled the house. I mean, they really came in for me and filled the house. And I remember one night, very early on, when I told my friends, I said, I need you to watch the kids for a minute. I just need a moment alone. And I walked into my room and I barely made it to the bed. I hit the floor, tears streaming. I'm pretty honest with God. I have that kind of relationship with Him. I don't hold back. I figure He knows my heart anyway. And, and I like to tell people God can handle it. Be honest with Him. And so I told Him I was not happy.
Mhm.
This was not what we prayed for. We had served Him, we deserved more. And, and but at that moment, I knew I had a choice to make, and I needed to make that choice, and the choice was I could go get up in that bed, and I could put the covers over my head and tell God I'm done, and you really do have that choice. Even as a Christian, you have a choice, right?
Mhm.
Or I had the choice to cling to Him with everything that I had, and, I remember just sitting there watching the tears hit the carpet, and I said, "God, I want you, and I don't think I can do this without you." And, I said, "So right now, if you can take this pain and these tears that are hitting the floor, and you can use it for your glory and for a greater impact for your kingdom, I don't know how, but I'm gonna give you my best yes." That was the first time that I open-handedly just handed him my yes, and
Mm.
I told him, I said, "It's like a blank check. It's signed. Whatever you want, you got my yes."
Oh my goodness, Francine, first and foremost, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss, your family's loss and his family's loss. I I once I heard your story and I had watched you go live on Facebook just very shortly. I guess it wasn't even but a week maybe or a few days after Wade passed, and you sharing your story and being so open and raw and vulnerable for everyone to hear, who can understand questioning the Lord, because a lot of us do that. A lot of us have done that. And there are a lot of different opinions, a lot of different maybe practices or religions that, or things that have been said to us maybe. Maybe we grew up in a way where we were told we shouldn't, but the truth is exactly what you said and what I believe too after losing mine and my husband losing our son Ben in his motorcycle accident. He was 28 and he and his or 25, he and his girlfriend or fiance were both killed, and mom as well. And had I not had and been in a place that I was in with my relationship with the Lord, I would be a big, huge mess because I too, it's nice to hear that people can have those kind of relationships with God. That's a relationship we should have, one that's open and honest, and one that where we can question our dad and say, "This is how I feel. I am angry. I don't understand why us, why me, all the things." And he's such a good father. He takes it, he hears us, he sees us, he listens to us, he comforts us, he brings us the peace that surpasses all understanding. He does. And how did your children, I mean, your children having such beautiful examples of what a marriage, with God being the center of, the marriage that you and Wade had, and also being brought up in knowing who the Lord is and being able to develop and create their own relationship with Jesus Christ. As
Mhm.
parents that might be listening who maybe they have lost a spouse, or maybe their spouse is nearing the end of their journey here on earth, how did you help comfort your children? How did you guys get through what, I mean, I think of loss, and I think of, we chatted about the preparedness, that God gives us, and even though a lot of times people will say, "Well, I never expected this," or "I never planned for this," or, "I
Mhm.
don't know what I would do if that happened to us," and all that, yes, are legit and valid feelings, but in a way, we chatted that the Lord, had prepared us a little bit for our loss, and so tell us a little bit, that maybe those parents that are listening, that how did you help your children in their grief and losing their father? And the
Yeah.
second question is, how did you get through your grief? Did you ever have times and doubts or think, "You know what? I can't do this." What was your children's grief journey like, and your grief journey? Maybe for those people that are listening.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because the children are really where I had my strongest doubts and fears, because we'd raised incredible kids and we'd done that together, and it was something that we planned on, finishing up together and living on rocking chairs, and so there's just a part of me that really was frightened of ruining them at this point,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
I never intended on being I hate to say a single parent because I still feel married to him. He just lives in heaven, but literally I'm raising them as a single parent at this point. And at this point, a very broken single parent
mhm,
and hurting. And I was afraid of that. As far as helping them, I think the main thing was there are two things that we did in parenting. Number one, recognizing that every child was different. Um, each one grieved differently. Each one needed something differently. And we knew this because that's how we raised them early on.
mhm,
And so I didn't treat grief any different. I didn't try to put their grief in a box or try to make them check off boxes,
mm,
because I knew every one of them was probably going to handle grief differently. I also very authentically and very openly and very transparently, now I didn't unload on my kids. I am the parent. I'm not their best friend. I am their parent, but at the same time was very transparent with where I was and what I needed as well. My oldest, being 21 years old and also a Enneagram one, if anybody knows what that is, it took charge, man. She, this is how she grieved. She needed to get some control on things. And so she stepped up beside me and really was very helpful. Of course, I had some really great friends there as well to help her. But she really kind of took charge and loved on her siblings. My middle one is my deep, sensitive. She was 16 years old at the time. Always riding with her dad. This is a time when girls really attached to their dad. She was going through a very painful season. And when she would unpack her grief, she would really unpack it in memories and stories, and we would give her room to do that. At times that honestly, it was very painful for me because of her unpacking, and that's where my friends would come in to kind of help bolster those conversations, but allowing her to do that. She also started a job at her taekwondo place because she needed a space to feel normal.
mhm,
And that was an area that her and her dad shared because he also was a black belt in karate. So for her, it was like tapping into an area where they shared. So we helped her to do that. She was the one who came to me and said, being the expressive worship leader, songwriter that she was, and even poet, she writes poetry and journals and blogs. And so she said to me, "Mom, it feels like everything that my whole life I believed with an exclamation points have now been bent into question marks."
Mm,
And she said, "Mom, I'm trying so hard to pull them back into exclamation points." And just giving her space to be able to express that, to hold her through that, not try to give her all the answers, that was her form of grieving. Grayson at 11 would, he was a private griever, and so he would act like everything is fine, and then I'd find him in the closet with dad's clothes.
mm,
And, he really started his grieving at about 16 when he really felt the loss. And that's when, of course, I leaned into it, right? But not making him feel bad for not grieving the way we think,
mm.
or for the others who were grieving and we not letting them have alone time to grieve, recognizing that every one of us was grieving differently and it was okay. But there was this combination, and this is the warning that I kind of give people. You're a household full of grieving people who are grieving differently. You're going to have to include someone, but you're going to have to be careful who you include. Not everybody can be in that sacred moment with you. These are people that need to be able to hear when you're angry and say the things you do not mean,
Right.
um, and allow you to say them, but then don't hold you to it or have to call the hospital because they think something's wrong with you. you know,
Yes.
give you that space to talk,
I
and allow.
love that. I That is the
Yes.
greatest advice. And the other, just before I forget it, is the
Yeah.
fact that God has equipped you. What a great mother you are. What a great coach, trainer, speaker, minister, that you I mean, you have really just made, I'm sure a lot of people a little more self-aware, or a little bit maybe, think outside of, I don't wanna say themselves, but brought awareness to everybody is different, everybody grieves differently, and what is so beautiful about what you said as well is having a select few come in and know that you are saying some things that you don't mean, and that they don't hold you to those things that you said. And because
Mm.
that is so true. I know that when my husband and I lost Ben, we were at different levels of grief, and you're never going to be on the same page. There's all those stages of grief. And I I guess as a woman, as a wife, as a mom, I don't know, but I could see that my husband was being very short with me after we lost Ben, and angry, and not angry at me. And he was
No.
angry,
Yeah.
and just probably angry at God. I don't know, but I know that he was angry and short with me, and that went on for a while, and I kept, asking God, please help me, please help me, please help us, please help him. And there was at one point when I finally had to say, hey, this has been going on for a year now, and I know that you are hurting. I know that you are angry, but I hurt too, and I'm angry too. And we need to figure this out. We need to figure out, do we need to speak to somebody or whatnot? Because while I understand and respect your grief, and not saying that you need to change it, or not saying that you need to stop it, or not, I'm just saying that this lashing out for over a year now, this isn't fair. This isn't None of this is fair. But we need to
Right.
figure out what we need to do. And everyone was at different stages of grief. And but the great thing about how good God is that through the chaos, when you lean into God, He helps you to lift your partner up, and your partner to lift you up. I mean, His timing is perfect. And His
Mhm.
timing was so perfect that I started recognizing there's an issue here. There's an issue. And so we need to address it. But I love how
Mhm.
you said that, children are different. They all grieve differently. People grieve differently. We're all wired differently. And just that, to allow them that space to be
Mhm.
able to do that.
Yeah.
And so you have your children who are grieving. What about, and I'm going to ask this just very bluntly, I guess, what about you though? as a
Yeah.
mother who and a spouse that may lose a spouse or a husband lose his spouse, and you have your children that God has blessed you with and you love so much and are hurting as well. What about you though?
Yeah. Interest here again, everybody's different. And when I look back, um, God kind of called me to something that to other people may seem a little crazy. First of all, we pulled out of our church. Obviously, this was a church start for us. I knew that it would not be healthy for me to stay there. I was in process of bringing in another pastor. It ended up that a church, a mother church, took over the church. It was a very powerful transition. The young man who now campus pastors that church was a young man that was called under my husband's ministry. So we're very attached to it. God was so gracious to do that. But I knew that I could not continue to attend because these people had looked to me as their pastor's wife, and I knew that would not be healthy for the new pastor's wife or the new
Mm,
pastor. And I would have strong opinions about how things were handled. And so we went looking for a church at that point. I will tell you, I learned a lot of things that churches need
mhm,
in that process. But anyway, we went looking for a church about 6 months in. We moved to Texas because my daughters were well, my first daughter was finishing up college. I knew my second daughter would be going to college. I still was working from home, so I knew that and then that I could work from anywhere. And so we moved to Texas at that point. And 4 days after the funeral, God called me to go out on Facebook Live. That's what you were alluding to that you have watched. Uh, for some people, that would not be part of their grieving process. God knew that would be a part of my healing process.
mhm,
My husband was doing live devotionals every morning, 15-minute devotionals. Facebook Live was the new thing. Periscope had just gone away. Facebook Live was the new venue for lives, and he was using it just to encourage people on their way to work. Um, God woke me up about 5:30 a.m. because he would go live at Wade would go live at 7:30 a.m. And so he woke me up. He said, "I need you to get on the Devo. I need you to talk to your friends." And I was like, "God, I just got done with the funeral. I have nothing to give.
mm,
Like, he's the one with the 4 doctorates. He was the one with all the education. This is not my thing." I argued with God for about an hour until finally God said, "You gave me your yes. I need you to get up. I need you to get on the Devo." And it was sloppy and it was messy and it was tearful and I put on some makeup. I'm not sure it stayed on the whole time, but it really was about just where I am and here's what's going on. Here's how God's healing us and what's going on. I figured about 50 of my friends would watch it and everything would be done. Well, I think it was 34,000 by midnight that night. The video had gone viral. People were messaging me from behind, and God said, "I need you to do this, Francine. People know where I am on the mountaintops, but they do not know where I am when life isn't fair.
mm,
I need you to show them." And I went live for 3.5 years every morning, Monday through Friday, walking people through the healing and through the grief. And it was raw and it was real. And I didn't pull punches. And people followed. And God knew that I needed a place to pour out.
mhm.
It was my way of grieving. It was my way of healing.
Well, I have to tell you that while like you said, while your makeup may have not been on perfectly or whatnot, it was the most powerful, beautiful,
Wow.
moving video that I've seen, and you can still find it, guys. You're gonna find all the links to all of Francine's links in the description, and I'm going to post that link of that Facebook Live in the description. It is powerful, Francine, and what I
Mhm.
saw from that, and I get chills thinking about it, is your yes to the Lord. Your yes to the Lord came out in that video, and I hadn't even we hadn't even actually spoke about your yes, but I'm telling you, when I watched it, I was like, blown away and could see the Lord working through you. And some of the comments says as you were speaking and they were just flowing through of all the thousands of people that were watching, it was powerful. And
Thank you.
I can see why now. My pastor at church, I always tell him, what is that like to be doing what God's called you to do? Because man, you're doing it. So let me ask
Mhm.
you that, Francine. What is it like to be doing exactly what God called you to do? Because I'm telling you, you're doing it. What is that like?
Yeah. It's hard to describe. When you first said it, the picture that I got was like slipping a glove on. Um, I don't feel, because I'm still doing what God's called me to do, because I'm so adamant that it's the only safe place in my life
Mhm, mhm.
is doing exactly what He's called me to do, and it never feels like work. Um, is it scary? Yes, there are times that it gets scary, but, the best way I could describe it is being on a roller coaster, knowing you're safe on the tracks, and at times, you get to a place where you can throw your hands up in the air and just go, "Wow, this is fun," and scream,
I
right?
love that.
Yeah, it really is like that. It is an adventure with him. It's so much fun with him, um, and, um and scary, but scary in a good way because he's got those tracks, and I know it. I know it more now than ever.
Mm. Okay, and so you and I were talking about, and that's the beauty. There's beauty in life, and there's beauty in death. I've said it before, and I will
Mm,
always say that I mean, we know from the Lord Jesus Christ, his birth and then his sacrifice,
mhm.
right? There's beauty in
Yes,
both. As horrific as the sacrifice was, there's beauty in it because he died for all of us. He died to save us, and it's breathtaking. But we were chatting earlier, and this is kind of going on a different subject, but we were
mhm.
chatting earlier about how sweet the Lord is in preparing us,
Yeah,
and how I had shared how the Lord had prepared me, even though people, moms, dads, parents, myself, I would have said that I was prepared to lose my son. And I
right.
don't think I was fully prepared, right? I wasn't fully prepared or knew what to expect, once we found out that Ben was gone. But he very sweetly semi prepared me. I wasn't, I don't know what the right words are, but because of the research that I did for a podcast years ago, before my son had even passed, the Lord had said, I need you to do a podcast and interview moms who had lost their sons. And it was specifically sons. This was way
Mhm,
before we had lost Ben. But
mhm.
when you think about the research and, some of the questions that I was jotting down was what, to ask these moms that I was interviewing, what were some of the, and we were very open and transparent, what were some of the dumbest questions people asked? What was some of
Yes,
the craziest things, that happened? Or what would you do differently in that when you meet up with a parent that is grieving? What can you teach us? Because there's great, we learn so much
yes,
from someone's passing. It's a very powerful thing, and we're all gonna pass, right? We're all going to
yeah,
pass,
yeah,
and
mhm,
but the Lord is sweet, and He semi-prepared me when I was doing the research to interview moms who have lost specifically their sons. Who would have ever known other than God would have known He was preparing me because I was going to lose my son in 2018,
yes,
and so I was semi-prepared. We talked about that, but we also talked about being a little bit scared of being prepared because
yes,
sometimes things happen and we're like, we both share that we're like, "Okay, well, I don't wanna be prepared anymore," or I'm scared. I'm scared."
yeah. Yes. I think that once you deal with something, then you realize how susceptible we are to things happening in your life, right? I think up until then, I felt I wouldn't have said that back
Mm,
then, but I felt kind of charmed, blessed, like nothing bad could happen to me. Although I knew that it could, but then once your life gets turned upside down and split in two, you realize how susceptible and how vulnerable we are in this world. And but then in the very beginning of grieving, we were brought a lot of comfort of the things that happened before that prepared, right? The things that where where now we have no regret because this was said or that was said, or I even have a friend of mine who lost their 6-year-old daughter in a car accident,
Mm.
and in the midst of that, I mean, even that prepared me, to be honest, walking her through that. But they had taken Easter shots with all the girls, 2 or 3 rolls of film. She's so glad she had. She went on an individual vacation with that daughter. And so she could look back and see God giving her these things in preparation for Celie going home,
Yes.
to be with the Lord. And so we too found many things that way too. My husband was going to the store to get creamer for our coffee, which I asked for, and Kool-Aid for my son who was 11. And so Satan was working on us. What if we hadn't asked? What if he had not gone to the store? All those things. And of course, me understanding that our days are written, and
Mm.
from the first day to the last. And so I know those things. But he had preached that morning on Jim Elliot, who had been martyred for the Lord. It was a story that was very dear to him and to his mom, who taught him about the Bible and about Jesus. And so he had taught about it, and we had sung the song by Twyla Paris that had a quote from his book called that said. Um, he is no fool if he would choose the thing he cannot keep to gain what he can never lose.
Mm.
And so we sang that song that morning as a duet. Well, my friend called me and said, "Hey, did you know that January 8th, which was the day that my husband went home to be with the Lord, was also the day that Jim Elliot went home to be with the Lord?" And it was God's little wink to me
Wow.
that it was ordained.
Mhm.
It wasn't because he went to go get creamer for me.
Mhm.
It was a way to shut the enemy up. And the fact that he said, "This is the day of the Ivies,"
Mm.
right? And so I could know that my husband was happy on this earth and
Mhm.
happy with us as he left this earth. So, I can't even tell you how many months later, or even it could have even been a couple years later, when little things would happen that look like new preparations,
Mhm.
that it almost became a trauma trigger for us of thinking, "Oh my goodness, is something about to happen to somebody else?" Right?
Right.
And God had to walk us through that and say, "No, I brought you those things so that I can comfort you, but my good things do not mean something bad's about to happen." Right?
Absolutely.
And I had to learn that all over again.
Well, and thank you for sharing. A lot of people question themselves, and a lot of people question themselves, what if, should I have, what if I wouldn't
Mhm.
have? And the enemy does, just as it
Mm.
says, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's a thief, just a robber, evil, and
Yes.
can do those things, can do those things if we allow
Yes.
him to do that. And
Mhm.
I appreciate you sharing that because, we're all human, and we all, I mean, Christians are human. We are all human, and we think those things. If only I would not have asked that,
Yeah.
of my husband or of my son, or my son was living in Abilene. If only he would have been here. But
Mhm.
we're not that powerful, right? And
No.
we have to continuously. I continuously fell at the Lord's feet, asking Him to
Mhm.
help me understand, to give me the peace that surpasses all understanding, and he does
Yes.
that so beautifully. And I think that grief is something that we obviously we don't know. We don't put a time limit on others. We don't know, but I will say that grief is something that you definitely need to work through, process through, feel, and move through, and not stay stuck. Because the
Yes.
minute, and I speak from experience, the minute that you get stuck and
Mhm.
you decide to, "You know what? This is too much. I can't function. I'm stuck." And then that's when the enemy does come in and really starts to take over. And so
Yes.
while we don't put a time limit on grief, it is, the best thing I can say is to process through, feel those feelings. They come in waves. I mean, we still
Mhm.
grieve, right? We still grieve, but I'm not stuck in grief. That can be a very
Mhm.
dangerous place to be. Would you agree, Francine?
Totally. totally agree. And you know, it does, I think in the beginning it's like big huge crashing waves that knock your feet out from under you. The waves still come. You know, I'm 7 years into this. The waves still come. Things still trigger tears, but it's not as bad of the crashing waves that yank my feet out from under me. And now I can, you know, I tell people now my memories have more happiness and joy in them than they do sadness.
Mhm.
Whereas at the beginning, it was more sadness. I also like to warn people my second year was the worst. And I've seen that over and over and over. We always think that the first year is the worst. And we enter the second year thinking, oh, yeah, it's been a year. I should be better. And it's not, it's harder. And it's okay. And explain that to your friends so they can walk with you and not. And I love what you said to move through. Um, People would say things like move on.
Mm,
I wasn't moving on. No, I don't, I didn't like the words like move on.
yeah,
And I didn't like the words of the new normal. There is no new normal because there's nothing normal
right, right.
in what I was experiencing, but move through, right? Move through,
Mhm,
keep moving. I thought that was such a powerful thing. Thank you for sharing that.
mm,
Um, because that definitely keep moving, right? You're not moving away from them. As a matter of fact, as Christians, we believe we're moving closer to them.
mhm.
Every day that clicks by is one day closer to me, whether Jesus comes back and takes us all or I go home to be with the Lord, one way or the other, I am moving a day closer to seeing him again. So,
Absolutely, I thank you for sharing that because a lot of people do feel like I
yeah.
actually just spoke to a lady not too long ago, and, the Lord had just said, "You need to speak to her. I need you to tell her some things." And one of the things was, as a caregiver, she was a caregiver of her spouse who had cancer, and it it's exhausting to do that. Doesn't mean that we don't want to do it. Doesn't mean that we don't love. It doesn't mean that they're a burden at all.
Mhm.
We want to be
Right.
the ones. It's a privilege and honor to be able to take care of a loved one that is sick. And but she was feeling guilty of feeling frustrated, feeling exhausted, feeling tired, and,
Mhm.
times wake thinking, "You're still awake," and I said, "That's what that's it's okay. It's a
Yes.
normal
Yes.
those are normal feelings to feel. You need to,
Yes.
instead of feeling guilty about them, process through, talk about it, don't keep
Yes.
them inside." If you, before he had passed, I'd, reached out to her and I said, "If you need a break," we all need breaks, right? I mean, even as parents, there are times when I had when my son was very colicky and I thought, "Oh my goodness, I need a break." It's not because I don't love him, it's not because I'm
Yes. Yeah.
hating life, it's because I'm a human being, I'm exhausted, and I need a little break, and so those
Yeah.
things are very important whenever you are grieving or grieving with other children, or I need some alone time, I just need to grieve by myself for a minute. It's very important to have, like you said, those people, those select people that will come alongside of you. And let me ask you this, and I know we probably need to hop off, but let me ask you this, Francine. First, before I ask you this question, I want to share a picture of
Yes.
your children, your family. This is your family, your kiddos, and,
Yes.
so who do we have here? Who is who in this picture?
The one peeping behind is Peyton. She's my middle child. She's a worship leader and she's my writer, my sensitive one, and incredible.
Mm,
Grayson, the little one in the front, he's my boy. He's 6'3", feeling called to
mm,
ministry and is now preaching, just like his dad. Both of them are extremely musical. All three of them are musical, but those two have kind of tapped into it. He's an incredible guitar player like his dad. Reagan is a speaker and an author and a podcast. She's a podcast host, and she is the chief operations officer for our coaching company, and so smart and so
mm,
amazing. And is usually my right hand person with everything. She's much like her dad.
mm.
And so it's really fun to watch. They all got a piece of his mantle, no doubt.
I love it.
Both in worship and preaching and speaking.
What a beautiful, beautiful family, beautiful children,
You.
and, how amazing is it, what blessings and gifts they have and they bring to you and to others, to the Lord first and foremost. And it's amazing when we go through the things that we go through and how God calls us to use those things. And that's one of the reasons why I have this podcast is not for numbers, not for likes, not for anything other than for people to let other people know that they're not alone in what they're
Right.
feeling and what they're going through and maybe can give someone some advice. I mean, there were even some things that you said today that I was like, okay, it just is so good to be able to hear that you're not alone, and what are some ways that other people processed or moved through their trials and the tribulations on here on earth. And so
Right.
you mentioned, and before we go, you mentioned a podcast, and I did see a podcast uh,
Over.
calling over
Yeah.
comfort. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is
Mhm.
that your podcast?
It is. I do like 10, 15-minute just encouragement. In our coaching company, we serve kingdom entrepreneurs. These are people who have a story a lot like mine. God took me on a journey, right? So he took my story and we started a 501(c)(3, a ministry where we began to speak and write books. And then after that, he then led me into the corporate world of coaching, where I trained to be a coach. I have 7 certifications in coaching. God showed me the power of coaching and what it can do and what it can do in the kingdom. And so then in March of 2021, we started our coaching company. And our whole point is that God's given you a story and a voice.
Mhm,
And we want to take you out of those hidden places and really help you become successful and have kingdom impact. And so calling over comfort is a 10 or 15-minute just a challenge, encouraging word. And a lot of people tell me they'll just turn it on when they're struggling in their entrepreneurship journey. It's not an easy road.
mm.
And they'll listen to 2 or 3 and get all pumped up and ready to go again. So
Excellent. And where can we find this podcast?
definitely Apple, Spotify, and all the different places.
Perfect.
So
All right. And
yeah.
guys, I will put these links up for you guys to be able just to click on them and you can go and find them. Also wanted to share one more picture. There's Francine. And so, speaker, coach, trainer, Francine Ivy. My goodness, I am just beyond honored that you said yes to coming on. First and foremost, that you said yes to God. And I think, God can turn everything around for his greater good. He can and he will
Yes.
if we allow him to. But I want to ask you this. I ask all of my guests before we hop off. And
Mhm.
again, anyone that is watching or listening, please know that I'll have all the links in the description. Just go there and you can find Francine and her podcast and the Facebook that I saw, the message that Francine gave and delivered just not too long after Wade passed. Extremely powerful. But Francine, let me ask you this question, and I'll let you hop off. But who, after everything that you have been through, you as an individual, you as a mother, you as a spouse, after everything that you have been through, who is Francine Ivy today? Who are you today?
Hmm. God's daughter. Um, I had an incredible father who taught me what it meant to be a daughter. Um, God has given me, and I know this is a privilege. I had a father and a husband who both valued me and highly.
Mm,
Um, Even at 25 and 30 years old, I could have crawled up in my dad's arms and he would have held me tight.
mm,
He wasn't perfect, but he was incredible, and he always expressed my value.
mm,
And so when I gave my life to Christ, and they began to describe that God was a father, it was really easy for me to see myself as a little girl putting my feet on his feet and dancing in the hallways of a beautiful mansion,
mm,
recognizing that I was his princess, and foremost, down to the depths of my being, I know that I'm his daughter and that he is well pleased,
mm,
even when I've spilt my milk and messed everything up. Um, at some point, I'm going to write a children's book about that. But even in my mess, even in my messy mess, I'm his daughter and he loves me.
Amen. That is beautiful. That is so
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Francine. I am grateful and honored to have met you, to be able to have heard your story, and for you to say yes to what God has called you to do and continue to do, and for you to say yes to come on and onto my podcast and share such a beautiful story, and have given some very encouraging, uplifting words for those of us that join you in that mess sometimes. You know, we go through the things in life, and but I like what you said, that if we are on a roller coaster with God, there are ups and downs, but He's with us in the mountains and He is with us in the valley. And we just continue to partner with Him and we're going to be okay. And I appreciate you so much for coming on, Francine. And
Thank
thank you for
you.
sharing your story with all of us.
Thank you. Truly was an honor. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for everyone else, I thank you guys for coming on and for sharing your stories with me. And believe me, if you have a story that you want to come on and share and tell, please just email me at tross3296 at gmail.com, or you can message in the comments that you have a story that you want to share, and I will see how I can connect with you. But as always, thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you next time on No Judgment here with Tish Ross, the podcast. You guys have a good night. Bye, all.